Welcome to A State of Mind, the podcast that brings together consciousness, meditation, mindfulness, psychology, psychedelics, and so much more in pursuit of this mystery we call life. This is Julian Royce. Adam, thank you for returning to A State of Mind podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Julian.
Yeah, and I don't know if I asked you this last time, but Adam Apollo is the name you have for yourself. Do you want to share about that? I mean, I was just thinking it's such a powerful name, and Adam, of course, from the Bible, Apollo brings to mind Greek mythology, Greek and Roman mythology.
Rockets.
Makes me think of the sun.
Yeah.
Makes me think of the divine masculine, kind of the primordial man. I mean, how do you speak to that?
Yeah.
How do you understand that? And is it a name you chose, or how did you come to have that name?
I have really cool parents. I can't entirely escape the ego out of it, though, because my parents told me that they both woke up from a dream one night, and they knew that if I was a boy, my name was going to be Adam Apollo, and if I was a girl, my name was going to be Kailea. And I actually have one of my best friends in my life is named Kailea. So I got a chance to actually meet the person who I would have been named that if I was a girl. So for them, they told me that they felt like Apollo was really powerful because, you know, it was 80s, we're going into the future, we're creating a new world. How do we get there? You know, and there was like the rocket launch, but also the sense of poetry, and I'm a Pisces, so I was born Pisces, and they were thinking like poetic, you know, rocket engineer, and they weren't far from the truth as a poetic starship builder, you know, that I ended up being.
Interesting. I love that.
Yeah. And the Adam grounds it because it means red man of red earth. So it's actually all about my connection to the earth, and the red dirt of many lands has healed me at many different points in my life.
Beautiful. I didn't know that about Adam, but I'm used to interacting with, people who've chosen some name like, so-and-so Starseed or this or that.
Yeah.
And then like I meet them like, 6 months later and they have some new name.
Yeah.
But you were given that name by your parents. That's something special about that.
For me, the journey was much more growing to own it and actually claim it. And it wasn't until after I woke up in high school and my latter days in high school that I was like, I don't just want to be Adam anymore. I want to be Adam Apollo. And I really want to claim that. And from then on, it just started becoming my public name and moniker in all my public world and business, and still is to this day. These days, I prefer people to call me Apollo if they're just going to say a name because, Adam reminds me of the young part of myself. But it's all beautiful, and I'm deeply grateful to my parents for that gift.
Yeah, that's interesting. There can be a lot of power in a name. I didn't know that about the red earth for Adam. Where does that, is that from Hebrew or what?
Yeah, it goes back, I think, to some of the earliest depictions of the name Adam from the old translations that come back to the early days of the first Bibles ever written, and essentially the early languages used to translate that. They all the name Adam or whatever is connected to red earth and the nature of earth and red earth. I think it comes probably from a story of like God shaping man, the first man, out of the red earth that hasn't yet become everything else yet.
That's interesting. Yeah, I grew up in North Carolina, and it's famous for the red clay soil. If you dig down there, you hit this like thick red clay layer. It's hard, it's hard for people to build sometimes, I think. Yeah. But they make a lot of bricks. They make the red bricks from it.
Iron rich, as they say.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Like talking with you, it makes me reflect. I think, I made an effort in my life to stay grounded in kind of the mainstream scientific view and things like psychology and world history. But then I'm also, I have a master's in religious studies, specifically Buddhism, and pretty much any religion or spirituality you delve into deeply, you discover these incredible views of the cosmos and worldviews, and some of them, they come in all different flavors, right? But they get really big and they get pretty sci-fi. If you just choose anyone, like take a roulette wheel of world religion and then go deep into like where how they understand history and the past and where we come from. And
Sure.
so I kind of like to bring that some into the podcast. I know you have a bigger worldview in terms of other star systems. I mean, how would you speak to that? I mean, it's kind of a...
Yeah, I mean, when you were talking about the ancient past going sci-fi, a great example is Ezekiel, right? So in Ezekiel, you have people experiencing these wheels upon wheels in the sky, flowing with light and fire that come down, and essentially land and dispense, keys for God's will and artifacts and different gifts. And I think that that's already just such a fascinating thing for people to look at. And most of the Bible as it stands right now has been mistranslated, retranslated, rewritten, recrafted over and over and over again. Most people don't even know, like the Council of Nicaea that happened way back in the day essentially wrote the version of Christianity that we have today. And they were trying to include elements of Mithraism, elements of Egyptian philosophy, elements of various other religions and philosophies of the time in order to be able to onboard as much of Europe as they possibly could to this new and growing, religious force, essentially union of Christ, so to speak.
And that kind of process we see throughout the history of religion, where especially when it becomes a bigger or more dominating religion, incorporating all these other local traditions and saying, oh, you can keep your Easter bunny and Easter eggs and you can still be a Christian. Or you can keep your Christmas tree, or you can keep your holidays, you can keep this or that. Or in the case of Christianity, like incorporating saints, is a way they did that.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. And so, Ezekiel, as we have it, is vastly different from the earliest stories of Ezekiel and the Gnostic versions and the versions that, end up in things like the Keys of Enoch, where there's really quite specifically the depiction of some kind of advanced aerial technology coming down, landing and interacting with people. Now, you also have this in the Vedas, and the Vedas go back way further. We're like 5,000 years ago. And you have these things called the Vimanas, which were flying ships, and full diagrams of these ships are still available from the earliest texts and writings. And the diagrams describe two kinds of ships. One that's sort of an aerial starship that looks like a temple with propeller systems and literally can be like a flying temple that moves around on the earth. And then others that have certain technological qualities that we don't identify and we don't understand as well. I'm guessing they're gravity drives of one form or another. But the fascinating thing is that if you look across the world, it's not just even in these major religions or in major writings. If you go to the indigenous peoples in almost any place around the world, they have stories about a connection with the stars. And they tell you that either their ancestors are from this star system, or their great teachings came from the stars. Like the Lakota, for example, who, within the Lakota tradition, the white buffalo calf woman is considered Star Nation. They don't talk about that externally to white people and to, the general populace, but internal to the Lakota, that's true. And I learned that from Orville Lookinghorse and his family.
So say that again.
That essentially white buffalo calf woman is Star Nation. That she came from the stars to teach a couple Lakota boys about the sacred traditions from the stars that they had forgotten. And the 7 sacred rituals that white buffalo calf woman passed on to the Lakota became the key ritual and ceremonial traditions that the Lakota keep to this day. It's literally their entire cultural identity.
Oh, that's amazing. And they trace that back to coming from the stars. Yeah.
Yes. And that white buffalo calf woman was reminding them of the things that were already there for them. With the Maya, you have their story that the 4 corn people, meaning the 4 different colored races, the red people, the yellow people, the white people, and the black people, right? That's the way they describe it. The 4 corn people came from the 4 corners of the great river in the sky. And of course, the great river in the sky, as they depicted in so many of the stone writings and walls, is the Milky Way galaxy.
Oh, wow.
So they're literally saying the different races on Earth came from the different parts of the galaxy.
That's really cool. So the Mayan people, even though they were, before Columbus and all that happened, they were still speaking about black people, yellow people, white. That's really interesting.
Yeah, all the different corn people, as they put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting with so much of this stuff, if you can look at it with a fresh mind and, from your vantage point, and like you could understand it in so many different ways. And I could also see how, some European colonialists with the idea that they're the superior culture and that these are very primitive people. And they're like, oh, corn people, what are you talking about? So you can see that. But then if you delve a little bit deeper and have a little bit of an open mind, it's like, this is really amazing, profound stuff that we find all over the world. And I think I like this, it seems hard not to look around world religion and world spirituality and not have an insight into these shared commonalities and the shared humanity and the shared human spirituality and spirituality meaning like how we understand our place in the cosmos.
Yeah.
And I think that's beautiful. And I think we get in all kinds of, there's a way in which each particular tradition, I totally respect them wanting to preserve their particular tradition.
Yeah.
But we could preserve the tradition and respect other traditions and be open to the possibility of these shared common things. And I think, so I've heard a Tibetan Lama talk about, ideal. Yeah. So you don't, because I've always been against fundamentalism, which is the approach of like, this is the only right way and everything else is just wrong or completely diluted or, hallucination or something.
Right.
And it's just, I never bought that. Even when I was a little kid growing up in North Carolina, I remember hearing people talk about Jesus is the only way and you have to join this particular church to be saved.
Right.
Because I was in the Bible Belt.
Right.
And I remember being 5 or 6 years old and be like, I can't be right. Like, I don't agree with that. And I definitely don't agree that everyone born like before Jesus is somehow in purgatory or hell. That never made sense to me either. I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
This is just way too ridiculous.
The more you pull at the sweater, the more ridiculous the threads get with pretty much every religion. I mean, and the reality is that it's a telephone game, right? So generation after generation, the question is, how are these people going to represent the teachings that are part of this? And when you have a source material that has clearly been rewritten, distorted, follows marketing and promotional agendas from like, the 300s to the 500s, you're going to have major echoes of that same karma coming through of that behavior. I mean, the reality is that, unfortunately, Christianity is one of the largest sources of Holocaust in the entire world. They murdered millions and millions of women and children across Europe by the claim that they were witches, essentially.
And that's all stemming from this fundamentalism.
And I say women and children because they didn't care if a woman was pregnant. They were afraid that if a woman was a witch and she was pregnant, she was going to give birth to a demon child. And so there was slaughter that happened. And it's a tough topic to bring up, because really we're in a country and in a world where a lot of people are Christian, and I've been down that pathway deeply. I love the teachings of Christ. Like he's my homie, but the teachings of Christ and the work of the Roman Catholic Church are two very different things. And, I often go down the rabbit hole of the topics of things like, okay, where did the devil as we see it come from? Well, it's Pan, and where did the evil pentagram come from? Oh, actually, that's the 5-pointed star of connection to the earth that the Druids and the Celtic people used across Europe. And so we've become disconnected from many of the deepest wisdom of our own root traditions by falling into the game of social coherence, learning how to just be a part of a social group, to be part of a religion, to be part of the tribe, right? You don't want to get left out. But in that process, we kind of assimilated in many ways into belief systems and ideas that no longer actually serve us at a planetary scale. And so the gift is that we now have this opportunity because we have so much information. We have the knowledge of all of these places in the world because of the internet and AI and these different systems. And so we can actually go back now and reclaim the parts of our beliefs from the past that are beautiful. And we can start to actually truly investigate, who are we anyway? Like, was the beginning of history ancient Sumer? If so, why were there all these things that suddenly were already there in ancient Sumeria, right? Same with ancient China. You have massive technological insights and breakthroughs that seemingly were just there at the very beginning of a civilization. And when you look at that, as well as the archaeological evidence all around the world, I'm sure many of your listeners and viewers have seen things like Ancient Apocalypse. Graham Hancock's a good friend of mine. Of course, we're pointing to an earlier civilization before the end of the last ice age. And then the real question is, well, and how did we get all of the amazing technology that we had then? Where did it come from? How did we carve and lift 70-ton stones and move them hundreds of miles to build a pyramid out of 1.3 million stones that's accurate to less than half a centimeter across a quarter mile of proportion? Like, how did we do these things? And it's pulling that thread and really going down that path that set me on the path of really discovering who are we and where did we come from and how do we know what we know and how do we do these things and what have we forgotten about ourselves?
Yeah, I love that. That's well said. And there's so much there, but we go back to, obviously there's so much beauty and wisdom in the Christian tradition.
Yes.
And definitely want to honor that. And
Thank you.
I think it's worth challenging anyone who is a Christian who's following that to look at what the history you're talking about, the Council of Nicaea.
It's important.
And to look at some of the Gnostic Gospels and the Gospels that were discovered. And there was one that I read that I liked particularly, which is the Gospel of Thomas. And it's short, it's very mystical, it's very nature inspired. And there's a beautiful line in there where Jesus says something like, you know, wherever you find trees or a rock, there you find me also.
Such a good line.
It's such a beautiful line, and you can look it up on Google now. Like you said, we have this information available.
Yeah.
If that gospel had been included in the canon, it may have helped prevent some of the massacres that happened. It may have helped assimilate some of the Druids and Celtics and those people and people that were later called witches. And the history of the witch trials it's terrible. But it also points to the power of the technology of the written word, which I think in our world today, it's easy to take for granted. It's easy to not even think about. But there was a text that was composed, you're probably familiar, I think it's called the Witch's Hammer or something like that. And this text was used to justify the witch trials. And it spelled out what a witch is and how the trial should be conducted. And it had these ridiculous things like, well, if you want to test if someone's a witch, throw them in water. And if they float, they're a witch. And if they sink, they're not. Of course, they die either way. So either way, the poor person is killed. And it's so absurd from our point of view. But this text, which came out just before the printing press, it spread all around Europe, was used. And so these things that we write down and canonize really matter. And they have these impacts over hundreds of years that are incredible. And, you know, I think a more positive example of that technology is our Constitution.
Absolutely.
And it's an incredible piece of work. And I would encourage everyone to actually read the United States Constitution.
Me too.
And if we keep coming back to that. I keep a
little copy of it like on my desk.
Yeah, I have
it's just a tiny little book copy. It's nice to flip through sometimes.
But that is a guiding text for our particular society. It's been amazing. And I hope that we can keep that alive and not have it get totally buried.
Definitely agree on that front. 100%.
But so you're sketching. It's cool that you know Graham Hancock.
He's a good guy.
He's become so influential. So the thing that opened me up to what Graham Hancock was sharing was, if you just look at mainstream science and anthropology and archaeology, anatomically similar or the same humans have existed on Earth for at least 100,000 years, maybe quite a bit longer. And they keep finding new. But let's just go with 100,000 years, which is a pretty conservative estimate.
Sure.
So anatomically the same humans for 100,000 years. Why would it be the case that 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 years ago, there weren't advanced civilizations that have now been lost? Like if they're the same as us, like, and we're doing it, why couldn't they have done it?
Yeah.
So that helped open my eyes to that.
Yeah, exactly. So the brain level is the same. The intelligence level potentially is the same. All of that kind of stuff is what you're getting at.
Yeah.
And
the physical body.
Yeah, there's absolutely no reason you couldn't have another very advanced civilization. And the reality is there was. I mean, the evidence is indisputable all over the world.
Do you want to share some of that as you see as the evidence for that?
Sure, of course. I mean, people often debate things like, what about the pyramids in Mexico? They're all just little tiny stones stacked on each other. Most people don't realize that of the literally thousands of pyramids across Mexico, most of them are still in the jungle.
I've heard
the
that.
ones that we see, they've been rebuilt 8 times over. There's 8 layers on top of the original pyramid infrastructure. Yeah. And the original pyramid infrastructure is mostly megalithic when you actually get down underneath all the layers. And that's what you'll see when you get inside some of the spaces. So the infrastructure, again, the mathematical precision, the celestial alignments, et cetera, that we see there, parallel the kind of stuff we see in Egypt, in the pyramids and the Serapeum and most of the ancient temple structures. That's not all dynasty based. It's pre-existing structures that the dynasties built on and added to. And in Egypt, it's really interesting because you can literally see sort of multiple phases. The original ancient megalithic construction where the stone is, like, for example, in the Serapeum, you've got 70-ton boxes, 1.5 feet thick with 2 feet tall lids. Each of the boxes is precision cut, where if you run a laser on it or put a square on the edge, it's exactly square and it's laser precise for 16 feet and 8 feet and 7 feet tall, right? That's how big these things are. And they're cut perfectly. And they also all have specific resonant frequencies within. In other words, it's not just a gigantic stone box made out of one stone, which, by the way, that stone is only found 50 miles plus away from where the Serapeum is. And by the way, they created a tunnel system 150 feet underground through solid limestone in order to place these boxes. But they also tuned the boxes so that every box is actually like a precise sonic instrument. I mean, give me a break. The level of engineering is just next level.
That part's new to me. What do you mean by a sonic instrument?
Basically that the giant, imagine your job is to create a giant stone box. You've got 100 tons of basalt that's just sitting there, right? The only way to cut that basalt at this 9.5 hardness basalt, like diorite mix that they have in the Serapeum, is you need a 2-story tall diamond saw. So you're going to have to use a 2-story tall diamond saw to cut this box and to cut out the inside of the box. You got to figure out how to do that. And then when you're done, you have to be able to play a note inside and it have a perfect resonant frequency. So in other words, the box has to vibrate at 91.5 hertz exactly. Good luck. Wow. That's your engineering task.
Yeah.
And that task they did not just once, but 28 times in just one of the halls of the Serapeum. Not only that, but they did it in every one of the major chambers that have a sarcophagus, as we call it. It's not a sarcophagus, it's a resonance chamber. And not only that, but they did it in the king's chamber, which essentially is a suspended structure inside of this massive, insanely, complex structure.
So cool to hear about it. I really want to learn more about this. I'm glad we're going into it. So within these giant blocks, they're hollow, or there's a carved out space?
No, they're solid.
They're solid. Okay.
Yeah. You're 70 tons of one giant rock.
What do you imagine or think, like, in terms of the resonant structure, a note, like what was that about? What's going on there?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of different technological things you can do with vibrational frequency. The more you look across Egypt, and you also see evidence of this in Peru and Bolivia, by the way, and I've been studying a lot of these ancient sites in many places, not just Egypt or Mexico, but in Peru and Bolivia, in different spaces where there are these ancient megalithic structures. And my belief is that they had different ways of generating sound. And one of those, obviously, is the ability to pipe water through a tube system or a piping system. And when you have the right air shaft that the water is passing through and the air shaft is there, that air shaft will make a loud sound at a very specific sort of note range based on the pipe that it's moving through. We do essentially the same thing now with foghorns. If you've ever heard a foghorn, that's kind of what it is.
Like on the coast.
Yeah, exactly. It's a pressure differential that basically, compresses air, pressurizes it, and launches it through, a horn that then blasts a specific note of sound.
Mm.
So if you have the ability to generate these kind of specific notes within a space, and then you have these giant, resonance capacitors that vibrate at that resonant frequency because they're giant boxes and they're hollow. And so the boxes themselves vibrate. The stone wall of the box is not hollow. It's solid freaking basalt, which is why it's 70 tons. But it's been cut so that the sarcophagus, the box, the resonance chamber itself, vibrates at that frequency.
Mm.
And once you get certain kinds of standing wave frequencies empowered by and stored by capacitants like that, capacitors, storing potential energy, there's a lot of very interesting things you could do with that. One thing, for example, is that with the right vibrational frequency passed through the right kind of granite, it becomes piezoelectric. So it will actually release electricity out of it when you vibrate it correctly. A lot of times we see people give an example of this where you take a block of granite or a piece of quartz crystal and they'll put a drill on it and they'll run the drill into it, and the drill is vibrating and compressing the molecules inside of the quartz, and it lights up and a bunch of light comes out of it.
Oh, wow.
So that's one kind of modern example of how we see this. So they had the ability to channel and drive electricity. It's not to the full picture that like the Tartarians, suggest. There's a whole conspiracy theory group in the world called, that believe in this thing called Tartaria. And they believe that, there was a super advanced culture until the early 1800s that somehow then just disappeared, and that all of our stories of our ancestors are lies, and all the books in all the libraries are lies. It's a terrible disinformation campaign.
More extreme of view.
It's so extreme and it's so bad. Huh. But what it was designed to do, that disinformation campaign was designed to distract people away from all of the real information about Atlantis and about this early period of human civilization. And because if you dismiss the advanced civilization technology stuff in Tartaria, you're going to automatically dismiss the same advanced civilization technology stuff of Atlantis. Right. That's how good disinformation campaigns work. They get you to turn against one idea, but then by default, they're turning you against other things that are true and that are important.
Right. That's a really good point. Yeah.
They did it with UFOs for ages,
Right.
So it's like, if you believe in UFOs, that means you think there's little Martian green men, and that flying saucers are real. And like they did that. They created that whole perception to turn people away from the idea of if they actually saw a ship or a UFO or whatever, they immediately gaslight themselves and they're like, oh yeah, there's no way. I'm sure it was just something in the sky, a weather balloon. They dismiss it.
I think we saw that, of course, with like, the Cold War and communism. And maybe
100%.
Maybe there was one or two good things about communism. I don't know. But instead, we've got to just totally dismiss all of it.
Exactly.
And use it as a hammer to like not even have a conversation.
Exactly. And right now they're trying to do it with Antifa, which is kind of hilarious, right? Yeah. Antifa being a terrorist organization, right? When Antifa just means anti-fascism.
It's not even
which means you're kind of against the way that Hitler did things, really. That's what Antifa means. Yeah. It means I don't like the way Hitler did things. That's fascism. Let's not do that. So you being against the way that Nazi Germany went down makes you Antifa, essentially. And so when you then conflate that with terrorism, it's just another, like, let's cast spells on everybody's mind and get them to think the way we want them to think. So it is really a powerful time for us to claim discernment and sovereignty over our own thinking.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's a really good message. And that's something I've tried to do with my podcast, is have a more nuanced middle way conversation that looks at different things. And with pretty much, with most things that people are doing, there's usually some good reason why they're at least trying to do that.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
That's fascinating. I mean, how are you seeing these ancient civilizations, like, and why don't we have more clear evidence that they were there?
We have insane amounts of clear evidence that they were there. Why hasn't the mainstream academic world accepted it?
Right.
That's a bigger question.
Yeah.
And
I mean, for most people
yeah.
who listen to this, like the average person, they're gonna be like, that sounds pretty out there, right? They're gonna have that automatic kind of dismissal.
Sure.
Atlantis, it sounds like this made up legend.
Yeah.
The idea that 30 or 50,000 years ago there was some human civilization that had technologies that we don't have today. Like most people are like, no, we were just like cavemen, living in a cave somewhere. Right?
Yeah. It's nice. It's a nice, comfortable belief to see it that way. And it's hard to face that there's potentially a conspiracy or an idea, something that we've been hidden from us, right? That's always hard to look at. 9/11 was brilliant and genius because the way it was done was so literally perfectly designed that feeling like, oh my gosh, like they actually would crash planes into a building, like, of course they're not going to do that to start a war, right? Like that would be crazy. That's like so not American, right? so the more crazy the idea seems, the further away from it we get in modern life. We're like, that just seems way too crazy. But I mean, here you have the word Atlantis comes from the work of Plato, where he tells a story, which essentially is a past life memory that he's talking about, where he's telling a story of visiting this advanced city, and he remembers this city, and he remembers the canals, and he remembers how it was all laid out. Now that didn't exist during the time of Plato. So like Plato did, he told it as a story about something that had deeper truth. And it has nothing, Atlantis and that pre-Diluvian civilization really has nothing to do with Plato. The reality is it has everything to do with the massive evidence that we see all over the world, in the actual sites, in the stone, in the geology. Robert Schoch is a great friend of mine. And yeah, the enclosure around the Sphinx has geological waterware and evidence that puts it at 13,000 years ago or further.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And then if you look at, now because of Göbekli Tepe, as Jimmy Church likes to say.
That's a good voice.
Like, would you go to Göbekli Tepe, you see that these stone circles were literally built tracking astrological alignments and astronomical alignments, and they exist far before the history that we've all accepted. They're back 12,000, 13,000, 14,000 years ago.
Amazing.
And when we start to look at carbon dating, that's been our main thing. Like carbon dating, oh yeah, that tells you when something was made. The problem is that if air ever touched it, ever, at any point since the time then it was created, the carbon dating can be off. So literally, unless something is hermetically sealed under the ground and completely never touched, never looted, never gotten to, our carbon dating has the potential to be off, and significantly off, because it will likely reflect whatever time the air was exposed to it and other carbon, dust from skin and things and life forms and, the living biome of the earth gets into the space. And then that is what we end up carbon dating, and not the actual thing. And when you can't really carbon date a rock itself, you can only carbon date the surface stuff, because the rock is, hundreds of thousands, millions of years old, right?
Of course.
So our entire method of forming the dates has been wrong for a long time. And we've also dealt with the academic momentum.
You think the carbon dating is totally wrong, or is it somewhat right, or more right in some cases and less right in other cases?
It all depends on the case. It depends on, is the space that was opened up, was it actually fully sealed from the surface or from any air whatsoever? If so, it's easier to say the carbon dating is more accurate.
So if we find a dinosaur bone way under the ground, that's going to be more accurate theoretically then.
If it's been underground, totally sealed, totally within its own environment, yes, it'll be much more accurate.
Interesting. Well, I kind of want to go back to this point. Like all these ancient structures, at least in my understanding, which isn't that, you know a lot more about it than I do, but they all, like you just said, they're tracking astrology, they're tracking stars, they're connecting with the solstice and the planets. And so yeah, do you want to speak to that? I mean, it's implying this deep connection with the stars, which is kind of where we started talking about.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, why is it that the Maori say that their ancestors are from the Pleiades? Why is it that the Maya say the four corn people came from the four corners of the river in the sky? You got any Irish in you?
A little bit.
Yeah, I thought so. So any of you out there that are Irish, do you know that your Irish ancestry goes back to something called the Tuatha De Danann? And the Tuatha De Danann were said to have arrived in the British Isles riding clouds, and they blocked out the sky for 3 days and 3 nights. They landed on the Iron Mountains, and they brought down from the Iron Mountains with them 4 sacred treasures from the islands in the sky. And these 4 sacred treasures, one of them is known as the Cauldron of the Dagda. And the Cauldron of the Dagda could feed an army forever. In other words, kind of like a replicator, right?
Oh.
Second is known as the Spear of Lug. And the Spear of Lug, when you carried it into battle, you would never lose the battle. It was more than a spear. It was some kind of navigation instrument. It had some kind of beacon system or something. And we have the same story about another spear thousands of years later. It's called the Spear of Longinus. And the Spear of Longinus was supposedly the spear that pierced Jesus's body. And if you carried it into battle, you would never lose a battle, right? Sounds like the same spear maybe, but that maybe got kind of Christianized or something. The artifact, was retold a new story, let's just say. Also, the Cauldron of the Dagda is the source of the idea of the chalice, and the chalice as the grail, that which gives eternal life, the goddess. So there's a deep relationship between the Holy Grail and the Cauldron of the Dagda.
Interesting.
And then you have the Stone of Fall, which sings when a king arises in the land and also has the ability to control weather, which that's interesting, isn't it? And we have other examples of stories of these ancient black stones around the world that could be used to control the weather and could command electricity. And one of those was believed to be the stone that was in the box that we call the Ark of the Covenant. One of these black sunstones, so to speak. And then you have the Sword of Light of Nuada, what is actually known as Colindrithan in the old tongue. And that was a sword that was brought here in honor of a great elven king named Nuada. And that was passed through leadership until it disappeared and reappeared. And they called it Caliburn, the sword of fire or the sword of light at that point. And then it disappeared again. And we don't hear it again until we hear it in the Avalonian and Arthurian legends as Excalibur.
Oh, wow.
So here we have these sacred artifacts that have properties far beyond normal objects that come from the islands in the sky. And this is literally the first poetry written about the people that became the elven blood, or became the Irish bloodline, which is elven, by the way, the Irish bloodline.
Oh, yeah. That's amazing.
And you have stories of the same stuff that gets spread across the Nordic lands and across Europe. There's 50 different names for fairies and elves. And there's just a ton of information there that backs this origin from the stars theory.
Meaning that
it's just forgotten.
Meaning that humans may have come from other planets.
Yes. And that in fact, maybe all of these different stories that these different mythologies tell in different cultures of their ancestors from the stars, or of these beings from the stars teaching about them, about who they are, maybe they're not all mythological. Maybe they're not every single one of them just something that people made up. Maybe there's a lot of them that are actually the true story. But to the archaeologist, and especially the early British archaeologists rolling around and doing all the initial studies on a lot of these peoples and cultures, it doesn't fit their worldview. It doesn't fit their religion. It doesn't fit any concept of reality they have. So therefore it is dismissed.
That's so interesting to think about. Yeah, it's interesting that I'm just remembering in studying the history of religion and then psychology, there's this idea that when people talk about aliens and alien abductions, that started, kind of in the 1950s, maybe 1940s. And that I've heard these like psychological theories that it was kind of, at that time, this like very scientific age. We'd lost touch with a lot of mysticism and a lot of this religion. And so through dreams, people started to connect with these extraterrestrial beings, and they had this spiritual component to them. But in talking with you and thinking about it more that I'm older, it's like maybe they all are speaking to the same kind of phenomena throughout history, and there's not such a big difference maybe between what are called aliens and what were called these spiritual beings. And you've shared beautifully about, Western Europe and all these legends and the Christian tradition, and there's so many in the East too.
Yes.
So in Buddhism, there's the word dakini, which means sky dancer. And I've heard a Tibetan Lama talk about maybe they're aliens because meaning maybe they came from a different star system. Maybe they're enlightened beings that came that way. And he was like open to that possibility. And it's like, if you just look at like kind of Buddhist tradition, just in this one example, sky dancers coming from the sky, imparting these profound spiritual teachings, had incredible magical powers, could make sense. It kind of lines up.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, the Eastern traditions, it's even more full. You've got dragons coming from the skies. You have ancient beings who come through portals in different places. You have gates to other worlds. You have maps of other star systems on the Tankas inside of some of the Tibetan Tankas. Romeo Shrestha and I worked together for some years, and he's the 9th generation incarnation of Arniko, who was the ancient Tibetan Tanka master.
Oh, wow.
And so I got to see in person a lot of Tankas, and some of them, would fill this whole room laid out.
Yeah, they're so big.
And when you turn them over, on the backside is the secrets the monks never let anybody see, which are actually giant sacred geometric star grids with constellations linking into different sacred geometries. And they weave that into the backside of the Tanka as the energetic framework that then comes through the Tanka.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I mean, that's just one example. Obviously, India, we talked about the Vimanas a little bit and the ancient Vedic understandings. And then you just have a lot of really interesting stories, like different martial arts traditions where there was a farmer and he goes up on a mountaintop, and then suddenly he comes down and he's a full-on martial arts master, right? And why are all of these ancient, super powerful training temples, in Bhutan and these other places way up on the sides of the mountains in the Himalaya?
Oh, it's way up high.
And they talk about that they built them up in the mountains to connect with the sky people and the star people and to like open that space for that bridge and that connection. So it's really only just in modern times, in our own modern scientism and sort of British archaeological westernized base narrative, that any of that has seemed weird or off at all, because it's always been that way other places.
Right.
Just like for the Lakota, like they've always treated White Buffalo Calf Woman as Star Nation. But to, everybody else, they're not necessarily open with that because everybody else is crazy and they don't understand that stuff, and they gaslight people and they attack you for your beliefs.
Yeah.
And that's
so interesting to think about. There's another common theme throughout the history of the world where the original people, or at least the king, comes from the sky or somehow connected with the sky. So I know more about Tibet because I studied it so much. So there's this ancient myth of how the Tibetan people originated, which is some kind of sky being basically mated with this ogress. So the sky being was male and the ogress was female. And in pictures I've seen, it's kind of like a monkey-like creature. And so it just made me think about this idea of these star beings kind of somehow maybe combining with apes, I don't know, and creating humans, I don't know. But then in Japan, like the royal family descended from like the sun, I think, and Louis the 14th was the sun king. And throughout history and cultures, there's this idea of like coming down, and then of course it's been used to oppress people in some ways too. Like here's the special royal family that came from this god or goddess, and here's the common people.
Yes.
But you can also understand it in more beautiful ways than that. It's not just about oppression. I think that's another place where we kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater, where we dismiss all of this as being about power struggle and oppression. And maybe there's more to it than that. And it certainly speaks to people's souls and a sense of belonging and culture and identity and religion. And I think it's kind of a modernist mistake to just dismiss all of that as superstition.
Agreed.
It cuts us off from our past and from that sense of like mystical truth that we can feel into.
Yes, totally agreed. Well, I think you wore the right shirt for this, because you've got literally like, stars evolving through monkeys and apes and et cetera to humans to unicorn status, right? Which is awesome. And that example is not the only one like that. I mean, in ancient Sumer, which we treat as the cradle of civilization, you have these beings, these advanced Anunnaki-like beings who essentially, are making humans more like them in order to help have them be able to do work for them and to, farm and to do all of these things. And so, yes, and there's these stories where there is sort of star beings or beings from the sky who are then, misusing power. But then there's also all of these other stories about different beings and ancestors coming in, seeding traditions. Quetzalcoatl is a great one, right? So you have a people that's lost and confused, and it's post end of the ice age, the floods have happened. People don't know how to get back to civilization. And so Quetzalcoatl comes and he teaches them all of these keys to how to craft the arts and the sciences, the mathematics, the stellar cartography, and all of these things necessary to craft a beautiful civilization again and reseeds advanced civilization. And you have that across many, many different cultures. Again, if you guys haven't watched Ancient Apocalypse, Graham did an amazing job in that story, in that series on Netflix, of covering a lot of these examples where you have an advanced being showing up, helping to recover the civilization after the end of the ice age.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've seen parts of it. I want to watch that again, but it's the idea that when the ice age happened, or at least when it ended, it caused the what is the word? Giant flood.
Yes.
That wiped a lot of it out.
Yeah, exactly.
I think if you
the
think
lesser
about it,
dryas.
If you think about it logically, anything that is that old, there isn't going to be that much left. Even our civilization, which we think is so amazing. Yeah. If we, if it just stopped, tomorrow, and 14,000 years went by. Yeah. What would there would be these big buildings underground, I would think, but there would be, most of it would be,
you'd mostly end up with the iron scaffoldings.
Okay.
So you'd see mostly all the iron scaffoldings of the buildings and the components of buildings remaining. Right. And also any of the buildings that used megalithic stone, very large stone structure. They would survive. So they survive, which is why the main piece of evidence we have all over the world that lives is the megalithic stone. It is ultimately the best evidence, and it's the evidence that's, would last another 100,000 years, So 10,000 years, 15,000 years, a lot changes in that time. Yeah. A lot. I mean, it's wild how different our world looks from the way it did 1,000 years ago. Yeah. Now multiply that by 12, 13.
Yeah. There's so many examples from the more recent past, like take Japan, for example. Yeah. They had these incredibly advanced cities built almost entirely out of wood. And after World War II, you can imagine there wasn't much left. Right. And so if that civilization had totally collapsed and we came back 1,000 years later, it would be like, oh, they had nothing here.
It'd be gone.
But they had these incredible cities and palaces and samurai castles built mostly out of wood. Yeah. Because that's what they built. So
a lot of people that have dreams and memories and visions of this pre-Diluvian era, this Atlantean period and Lemurian period, maybe even before that, a lot of times they describe buildings that seem like they're carved of like a soft bone-like structure. And there's the megalithic structures too, the big granite heavy-duty temples that like needed to stay. But they describe all these vast carved, incredible, lightweight, modifiable buildings and crystalline, glass and crystalline like structures. And if these things were built with some kind of like permacrete kind of thing or whatever, you can imagine like a special mixture that they made to create and craft these amazing sites. Yeah. And then they also used a lot of quartz, and they used a lot of selenite and other kinds of, base crystal structures that they could then weave into those. All that stuff would be dissolved. It's just gone. It's just gone. It's not going to last. You end up with maybe like shards of quartz in areas, but the actual structure and the architecture would just be completely invisible.
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, another angle that I like to think about these things from is we think of ourselves as so advanced, and, in a lot of ways we are. We have incredible technology, and we also have incredible amounts of suffering, right? And so if there was some ancient civilization, even if they were living like technologically in a simple way, but the people were actually connected and happy and peaceful and prosperous and loving each other. And
Yeah.
I mean, isn't there something to be said for that? Like what?
There's something to be said for everything we've learned across every stage of history. I believe that the past is the greatest library of teaching that we have. And if we are simply able to accept our past more fully and more deeply, both personally and ourselves, our soul's journey across lifetimes, and also to accept the lessons that we've learned, as a people, then we are well informed to navigate into the future. If you don't have that knowledge of the past, you are driving blind because you cannot see what you're going to miss. And all these things that have happened and the patterns that have happened, that's all designed to teach us how to navigate better going forward.
I like that. Yeah. And similar to the, Buddhist view and the Indian yogic view of being reborn. And we find rebirth throughout, again, it's a theme throughout human culture and civilization, this idea that we're being reborn. What do you think about this? Like, when I go to sleep at night, I probably have all kinds of crazy dreams. And then when I wake up in the morning, I forget maybe 90%, maybe 95%, maybe 99%, maybe 100%.
Right.
A lot of people I talk to, I don't remember my dreams at all.
Right.
And there's this amnesia quality. And I think a similar thing when we die, if we are reborn, it's total amnesia where we don't remember it. Most people don't remember it.
Yeah.
How do you explain that? Like, why the amnesia? Like, it's because it's like, okay, we're going through these rebirths and we're learning and we're growing. But then if I can't remember anything, like, does that really make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, when we're dreaming, we're doing one of multiple things. One is we're either processing subconscious information and we're working things out in our brain and our subconscious to better understand what we've been experiencing, what we have been going through. On another level, you can also travel in the astral in your dream time. So you can actually be seeing real people, real places, and real things. And on the astral, time is a little flexible. So sometimes you'll pick up the pattern of a series of events that's often going to lead to a certain specific thing happening. And when the momentum in the structure of space-time is big enough towards that event, this is where people dream of things that are about to happen, big crises, big events in the world. And they can actually see the details of that and access that. And then other times, I think our dreams are past lives, and we have dreams literally that reclaim specific experiences we had in other lifetimes. The quality of these astral dreams and the past life dreams is very, very different qualitatively than the dreams that we have that's just processing the unconscious. And interestingly, our capacity to remember the dreams also changes. When it's just unconscious processing, it's kind of like you're running the backlog and you're cleaning the cache, in the computer system. But when it's memories, when it's access points, when it's future visions or astral experiences, we tend to wake up and we do remember. They are more vivid. There is more vivid detail. And so I hear in your question sort of the related question, which is, why don't we just remember our past lives? Well, interestingly, as kids, a lot of us just do. We play out scenarios when we're playing games that are from past lives. Our imagination is full of all these things that, where did it come from? How did we imagine that into being? Well, because a part of our soul already had the context, the information was already in us, and then our brain starts mapping out that information into scenarios and stories that then we play out. And I did many of my past lives when I was a kid. I'd be a cowboy for Halloween. It reminded me of when I was a cowboy in the West. And then I had, I was even this alien superhero being for Halloween at one time, or at one point. And I used to play with Legos, and I would build these space police Legos. And I had all these scenarios where I was going in and rescuing people from different planets. And I never saw any movie like that. I never heard any story like that. It didn't exist anywhere in my childhood. And yet it was totally there. And being older now, looking back, I'm like, holy crap, I was literally playing out scenarios from my lifetime as a Shiheli when I was rescuing people off planets during the Orion Wars, which I write about in my book, The Dragon Key.
Amazing.
And it was like, wow, it is part of me. So the thing is we do have the information within. Our brains haven't caught up to that neural network yet, or built all of those connection points yet, but the information's inside of us. So the more we experience things and build out our neural network, the more things start to place themselves and make sense. Culturally, we just also gaslight all our kids and tell them it's not a past life, it's just their imagination. Right. So that's one way we're cutting it off.
Yeah, totally.
You know, and there's quite a few other ways we also cut off that kind of information as people are growing up. Because we don't live in a culture where psychic abilities, past life memories, and these things is accepted as narrative, even though there's tremendous amounts of science behind it.
There's a lot
of
evidence.
It's just not mainstream academic yet.
Right. That could shift, because I've seen some compelling cases where a 3 or 4 year old child describes in detail how they died in a past life. And then the researchers actually been able to find that in the newspaper record or whatever.
Dr. Ian Stevenson's work is great for anybody curious about this. I also get into it in my book, Lifetimes, which is by Common Sentience. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, etc. But Dr. Ian Stevenson did over 2,500 studies of kids.
Wow.
And they were able to find in many of the cases, the actual person, the actual past life, paralleled like where the person in the past life got shot or stabbed or something happened. The child now has a birthmark or something on that part of their body. James Leninger was the most famous case because that went totally viral, went on the news and everything else. Kid who remembered his entire World War II squadron, remember the name of his captain. He woke up from nightmares all the time because he was crashing his plane. Oh, no. His parents were trying to figure out how do we help him with this, and then they decided to do a little research and look up the names that he listed as his squadron, and sure enough, they were real names of a real squadron. And he was able to point to the man that he was in that squadron, and he remembered where he crashed his plane near Tuojima. They end up doing a whole study. They go there and they find the plane crash in the ocean.
That's amazing.
Which
I'm gonna look that up later.
It's just an amazing story, but it's just one tiny piece of a vast array of science that proves that people have multiple incarnations or lifetimes, or past life memory is real, essentially.
So fascinating.
And,
it really is.
Nobody knows it.
It's a great example of an incredibly fascinating and compelling subject that mainstream science has said, let's not look at that.
Yeah.
let's not bring that into Harvard or into our, our labs or whatever it is.
I know.
Or journals. And
I know. It's one of the most empowering possible things you could investigate too. Because imagine if you already spent 30 years in one life, mastering a certain skill, 40 years in another life, mastering another skill, another 20 years in some other life, mastering another skill. And imagine you remember those lifetimes and now you have all those skills back. Talk about accelerated empowerment. Talk about not needing college to teach you what you want to learn, because you actually remember all of these different insights and skill sets from different lifetimes. So it's not good for the college business model.
Oh, that's fascinating.
And then you also roll over to things like tenure and the reality that by incentivizing professors to ensure that the specific understanding of what's true is preserved through time, you tenure them. So essentially, like, they've got to present something at their tenure if they want to keep going as a professor. But if they go too far off the acceptable narrative, they won't get it.
Right.
So they have to stay in line that way to get it. And I mean, you look at CERN, $10 billion a year spent for particle acceleration to prove the Higgs boson exists. Nassim Haramein publishes a paper showing that space-time is a discrete lattice and we can solve for literally the mass energy of black holes and the mass energy of protons using an equation that you would learn in high school, a basic algebra equation, and instead of all the Einstein field equations. And we essentially, from his work and the colleagues around him, we prove the field of space-time is a highly energetic tensegrity structure, which means you don't even need a Higgs boson anymore, right? And so we disprove the need to even find a Higgs boson. But do you think they're going to accept that? Heck no. That's $10 billion a year they'd be saying no to.
Right.
So what happened instead? We had several people from CERN that we sent the paper to defect and ask to join our team.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
And we worked with some of those guys from CERN,
That's
like
true.
in the physics.
That's amazing.
And
do you want to share some of those names?
Of the people from CERN?
Yeah.
I can't do that. But Nassim Haramein, obviously, I can talk about. Yeah. And Amira Val Baker, William Brown, Marshall Lefferts. These are some of the other colleagues that we built the Resonance Academy for Unified Physics. Robert Grant joined that academy. That's how he and I met.
Interesting. Yeah, you're way outside my, pay grade with this kind of stuff, but it's fascinating to hear about and like think about. And
yeah,
it's interesting. Like, I don't know. I mean, there's so many different directions we could go, but there's certainly been still alive today Buddhist cultures where you have, children being recognized as reincarnated meditators, and they have the ability to, say from memory these texts that they studied in past lives. So that's another way that's kind of been looked at.
Right. Yes, 100%. I mean, like I said, Romeo Shrestha was chosen that way, and I worked with him for many years. Dalai Lama is the same way, and there are traditions where that is just naturally acceptable.
That's just part of the culture. Yeah.
And I think the main point I was making by going down the physics rabbit hole is that the situation is exactly the same. You have new solutions in physics already. We already have solved for the strong force. Like, we already have solved for weak force. We've already solved for the Higgs boson. We already have solved for a lot of the biggest problems in quantum mechanics and the standard model, as they put it. But have any of those major fixes been fully accepted? No. Why? Because to fully accept that would mean deviating out of the acceptable safe bounds of the academic world and the tenure as it stands.
Interesting.
And so it's easier to say, oh yeah, that's just pseudoscience, until you can't ignore it anymore, or until one of your own researchers inside the space is able to prove that it exists enough that then they can carry it the way it needs to go. So that's how it works, and that's how it's worked across history. Now, looking back, you always see the real situation. Like, we look back and we understand that Newton was actually an alchemist,
that's
not just a physicist.
Amazing history,
right? Copernicus had way more to offer than just like the sun being the center of the solar system, and had all kinds of other insights. But it was often not until the whole structural momentum changed that all those early beliefs become more accepted.
Right. Interesting. I mean, do you see the CERN, whatever it's called, particle collider as a waste of money? Or do you think it's going to lead us anywhere? Because it's been a few years now. We haven't heard much about it.
I don't think it's a waste of money. I mean, it's been perfectly useful to slam things together and see what happens. But I do think there's other deeper concerns I have about things like CERN, which is the like 75% of time that's happening behind the scenes that nobody knows what's actually going on in there. Oh, yeah. It's when all the scientists go home and all of the black cars and black ops groups come in to take over the facility for the rest of the period of time until the scientists come back in the morning. That's the part that I'm not so sure about. Like, what exactly are we doing with this thing? Well, I've heard of this directly from people that worked at CERN. Oh, so, yes. There's no evidence out in the world about this, but I think it's that's not true, actually, because you can look at like the actual, booked time available at CERN, and there's very clear blacked out zones that they don't talk about what's going on in those periods. Special research, let's just say. Yeah.
Do you have any, I guess the question that's popping up for me, I've heard some people talk about that sources of more or less infinite energy have actually been developed and then covered up by the powers that be. Do you have anything to share on that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I got really interested in 0-point energy systems back when I was in college, and I, doing all this unified physics work, exploring new technologies, exploring, how do we change the world fully at scale, and could technology help us do that? 0-point localized free energy is one of the real key metrics for that. And
what does that mean? 0
why do we call it 0 point energy? Because whenever you have a magnetic field at the 0 point between the positive and negative pole, what we see is energy flickering in and out. We call it virtual particles usually, but it's not virtual particles. It's actually the quantum field essentially showing that it has charge, and it spikes in that charge. But it's always right in that spot between the positive and negative charge, right in the exact 0 point, right? So anyway, I followed these forums back in the day when I was in college, and I remember I was reading through all these projects and all these forums where people were working on stuff, and I literally came across a guy who's their team, he was like so excited. He had just shared about how his team thinks they just solved it. They knocked it out. And then 5 messages later, he's like, my team is missing. I can't find them. Does anybody know what's happened? And then the next thing I know, so many messages later of people freaking out, it's just radio silence. Like they're gone. That team is gone. Nobody knows what happened to them. And I watched that as a college kid. So you better believe I immediately, like, my paranoia of like, oh man, like I got to be careful about what I do and what I say and what I go at if I'm going to try to, work on new energy systems or anything that's like against, multi-trillion-dollar industries like the oil and gas industry and that kind of thing. And it took me a lot of years later in my life to get more comfortable about talking about certain kinds of things. My galactic experiences, my past life experiences. I had a long growth curve to feel safe because I watched how people were taken out and how things disappeared.
Yeah, I've heard stories like that, and I haven't taken the time to like totally dive down the rabbit hole and try to figure out, what really happened or whatever. But there's multiple stories circulating online of people who seem to have discovered something in this realm and then literally fell out of a window was one of them, where there was a newspaper article I saw. So
and I've worked with a lot of other really, really beautiful and interesting people over the years. And, Foster Gamble is one of them who created the Thrive movies. And Foster spent many, many years going in and trying to find energy labs and groups building new technologies and stuff like that. And he has some horror stories about some of them being silenced and disappearing and losing contact. And there's others that have stayed smart and stayed under profile. But here's the thing. If you're out there in the world, I want to leave you with this like little ray of hope here, is that if you're out there in the world and you're working on new gravity systems or energy systems, you're working on something that could literally change the entire world because of its technological power, you must open source it. When it works, when it's ready, don't wait. Like, do the work in silence, be quiet about it. And then as soon as it works, literally send it to every university you can, every group that you can all over the world, and do it as fast and as big of a blitz as you can. That is your safety net. If you do that and you give it to the whole world, then it'll make it. But it's often our own greed, our own selfishness, our own fear, that ends up making us fail. And we're in a different kind of transition in the world right now, where we need to open up the gifts and give the gifts to people, give the things for free to the world that are truly needed for planetary transformation. And believe me, if you do that and you've got the system and you've got it working, give it to the world, and then you'll still be way ahead of everybody else when you release your infinite battery or your drive or whatever it is. And I have a lot of hopes for certain groups, like the guy in Zimbabwe, for example, that has the battery engine that's been running forever. And there's quite a few of these things popping up. So we're really close to witnessing a global transition of energy.
That'll be amazing.
And it's going to be fantastic.
Love that.
Yeah.
Well, here's one more question for you, maybe similar to the one I asked about why we don't remember our past lives. So the question is, okay, we come from the stars. There's these advanced alien civilizations out there. Where are they? Why don't they come help us? Like, why don't they show up tomorrow?
They are here.
They're here.
Do you remember I guess it was last year. Was it the year before last? It might be actually. Yeah, it was the year before last. Do you remember when literally every single social media site was just going viral with all of these videos and images of things in the sky, like flying around, and these like battles in the sky and in the clouds happening. And there was like all this stuff all over the world, right?
Yeah.
So what we were seeing is all the countries launching and testing their drone programs. All the military drone programs were essentially completing at that time.
Jeez.
So they launched tons of military drones all over the world to test them. And guess what? Some strange vehicles wrapped in plasma came in all of these different places and would interact with the drones to see what happened. And the drones would shoot at the plasma thing. And then what happens next is we see the plasma thing kind of flying around the drones. The drones are trying to attack and shoot at it and shoot whatever. And then the drones just fall out of the sky. Wow. And the plasma thing keeps going and shoots off.
Interesting.
So this actually is part of what helped there to be the big Age of Disclosure documentary to coming out, because it gave them an in to say, well, the military doesn't know what these things are and they could be dangerous. So we need to fund more weapons and we need to fund more protection for ourselves against these ETs, because they can shut down anything. They can shut down our nukes. They can shut down our drones. And so they use that as a fear narrative to continue the same old disinformation story that they're here and they could take everything from us. But look, people, if Independence Day was going to happen, it would have happened a long time ago. They could take this world at any time with their technology. That's not what's happening. Instead, they're quietly connecting with and communing with thousands and thousands of people independently all over the world, probably millions at this point. I don't know. I know probably thousands of people myself that have had contact with ETs and different experiences like that. And so they're quietly making contact with people all over the world to truly build the understanding. And meanwhile, they are watching for nukes, for military drones, for any significant controlling pattern that could implement a new state of control over the people. And they are absolutely helping us shut that stuff down immediately.
Interesting. Yeah, it's fascinating to think about. I guess, I mean, whenever you think about it, it's for sure the case that there are thousands, tens of thousands of people at least who believe they've contacted aliens in some way when they talk about it and they share that with us. So maybe they're all deluded or maybe not. I don't know. But one thing that for me is a logical way that I think I open up to the possibility of either alien intelligence or guardian angels or some kind of extra powerful force that's looking out for our good that's actually here. Is the fact that there hasn't been a nuclear bomb dropped in war since 1945. And if we just look at human history, that's pretty hard to explain. You would have expected us to have totally destroyed ourselves in the 50s.
I know.
And the fact that we haven't makes me think maybe there are some guardian angels that have our back, or aliens, or however you want to talk about it, because just relying on humans, given our history, it seems pretty unlikely. And I'm grateful that it's the case.
Anyone listening to this can just go look up on YouTube, Larry King Live interview with 3 generals, UFOs shut down nukes. And there's 3 top generals from the United States who literally go through and testify about how they had different nuclear testing programs where they were launching nuclear weapons and warheads to test them. And, you know, one of the cases, the warhead literally is flying through the air. Ship comes in, little light like this, flies to this side, flies to this side, and then it goes over here, and the whole nuke dismantles itself, and the whole rocket comes apart, and it just falls inoculated to the ground.
I've not heard that. I want to look that up.
There's actually quite a lot of evidence, and there's more evidence than you'd think, because the military doesn't want to have those conversations with the public. It's been whistleblowers that have released it. But the amount of times this has happened is really the interesting picture, because essentially what you're looking at is there is a force that is literally keeping us from destroying ourselves.
That's what I'm talking about.
And they are supporting 100% the evolution of our species. And I know this now more than anything because I've been in direct contact with them for a long time.
Wow.
And I'm watching and witnessing how different contact experiences and the knowledge and the connection to the star family and the galactic knowledge is actually accelerating the ability of so many people to make the world a better place and to actually serve the world in a better place. So, and that's also true for a lot of really amazing technologists. They don't just, it wasn't like the idea just like happened over breakfast. They have psychedelic contact like experiences, and they see visions, and they have memories of things, and all that happens, and they get how important it is, and that's what sets them on the path of doing the craziest thing, which is creating a free energy system or whatever.
Amazing.
Yeah,
love that. This feels good. It feels like we're getting to more hope here at the end, because it's so easy in this world to give into cynicism, nihilism, to think that everything is pointless or meaningless, and I think that's partly coming from what we spoke to, the materialism and the kind of denying our history and denying our spirituality and all that.
Yeah. It's important for us to be open to all of the possibilities.
Yeah.
And we've been given we've been dealt a hand, especially at this time, that is challenging to look at. And it's scary. It's scary to see our shadows being expressed out in the way that they are right now all over the world. But as we've seen over and over again in history, it's often the times when the greatest shadow becomes visible. It's the darkest right before the dawn. It's where we can really see ourselves and really see our pain. And that helps us choose to grow. That helps us choose something new and to create something new. And I believe we're in one of the greatest transitions this world has ever seen. The singularity is already here. We are in the threshold of a crossing into a world unlike anything any of us have ever imagined. And the AI revolution is just the first step of that. Because when free energy is available everywhere, abundance flows in ways people have never dreamed. When gravity drives are created, you'll be able to get in your car, spend the afternoon on the beach in the Pleiades, head to Japan for late night sushi, come back for dawn at the pyramids, and then go home for an evening and watch Netflix on your TV. And that is the kind of experience that is coming in the last 10 years.
Wow.
So we're going to see it in our lifetimes. The Earth becoming a galactic civilization, and it will absolutely be something.
Interesting. I love that. I love having a positive vision to work towards.
Good.
Yeah.
Yay.
Well, this is a rich conversation. Thanks for going there with me.
My pleasure.
Thanks for being
Julian,
on here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
May we all awaken our state of mind.
Yes.